Hello, uh, good morning. So today I'll be sharing a few slides about systematic review, diagnostic test accuracy, and a few basic slides on the various study designs in diagnostic test accuracy. My name is Dr. Jefferson, and I'm an assistant professor in CMC Vellore. So, what is a systematic review? Systematic review is applying a formal or a methodological approach, a standard approach to obtain, analyze, and interpret data on a particular topic. So you have a particular research question or a topic. For example, let's take the diagnosis of tuberculosis using gene expert. Now that's a topic you need to know um, how good gene expert is. So you are methodologically creating a search strategy. You're collecting all the data in most available research platforms. You are individually collecting those studies and you're analyzing the data, pooling the data from the individual studies, and you're interpreting and giving a final estimate. So that is what is a systematic review. You systematically, methodologically collect, analyze, and interpret available reports on a particular topic. What is meta-analysis? That is usually the second half or that which that follows a systematic review. It is the main part of systematic review is combining the size effects, okay, into a single estimate. Let's say you are you're finding the odds ratio or the risk ratio or diagnostic test accuracy measures such as sensitivity and specificity. Let's say the same example of diagnosis of tuberculosis with gene expert. So based on this, you'll be able to calculate a common sensitivity and specificity that has been published by multiple publications. So you do a systematic review and search and obtain maybe say 10 articles on the same topic, diagnosis of tuberculosis by gene expert. Then you obtain and you combine everything, analyze and interpret, and you take a size effect. Okay, a combined single estimate size effect, a single sensitivity and specificity by combining the data from the last 10 studies. Now that is what is called meta-analysis. So if you look at the levels of evidence, systematic review and meta-analysis are there right there on the top. Okay, they are the highest form of research scientific evidence. Okay, that is available to us, and below them is randomized controlled trial. Okay, cohort studies, case control studies are all much lower down the level or the quality of evidence. Okay, so that's why it's very important. Somebody has to sit and collect all the randomized control trial data on a particular topic or cohort studies or case control studies on a particular topic and combine them to give a final pooled estimate, which is going to be the highest quality of evidence available to us. So if you look at knowledge generation per se, the basic epidemiological studies such as trials or cross-sectional studies, so they collect data in a particular population or a particular subset of people or in a country. Nowadays, there are a lot of multi-center, multi-ethnic, multi-country trials also. So they generate knowledge. Okay. Now, the knowledge per se, whether it is applicable to the entire population or particular country, it may not be so because there may be variable studies with variable data. Some may be positive, some may be negative. Just because one study is showing, gene expert is very good, highly sensitive to diagnostic, it may not be the case. There may be another study which may disprove this finding. So there are certain tools by which you combine or you look at all the studies on a particular topic and come to a final conclusion. So that part, that is the synthesis, is the tool. Only when you do the systematic review or synthesize data or do pooled estimate, a government or a national authority can look into that data and make a policy that will be useful for the people. Okay, so there is knowledge generation, then there are tools to synthesize what we want to see, and then finally it reflects in policy. So if you look at a Cochrane systematic review or any systematic review, the first thing is to define the question. What is your research question? So I think right now we are working on TB lamp. Previously we worked on TrueNAT study. So that is the question. No, we are looking at a diagnostic test accuracy systematic review. So we are looking at the what is the accuracy of TrueNAT in diagnosing pulmonary tuberculosis, or what is the accuracy of TB lamp in diagnosing pulmonary tuberculosis in a specific population, be it pediatrics or adult. Second is to define objectives and eligibility criteria. I think Dr. Lieberg is already working on it. He has shared a few objectives for the TB lamp review. We had a specific set of objectives for TrueNAT. If you remember, initially we had many objectives like what is the diagnostic accuracy of TrueNAT. Then we looked at diagnostic accuracy of TrueNAT in specific subsets like diabetes. Then we also looked at how good TrueNAT is when compared against gene expert in diagnosing TB. So these are all objectives. So we need to know what we are going to look for. Unless we predefine these things, we will be lost in the whole process of systematic review. Third is developing a protocol, which we are all doing right now. Okay, so a protocol has various sections. You have to predefine what kind of patients you're going to choose, what kind of studies you're going to include, which languages, which databases you will be searching, and what study designs you're going to include, that we're going to see in the second half of this class. So all these things have to be in paper, and most journals right now, they require your protocol to be published or in a public repository or in a trial registry such as Prospero. You have to register it so that the readers will retrospectively know that you have a plan and you went ahead with the plan. So that will prevent bias to some extent. No, you don't write a protocol, you go into a research question, then you realize, the studies are not like that. You wanted to do in, systematic review of RCTs, but then you realize that particular topic has only cohort studies, and in your protocol you did not have a plan to include cohort studies. But now there are only cohort studies, so you want to do it. So that means you're not following the protocol. So protocol has to be well thought of, adequately worked upon. Once finalized, it cannot be changed. Okay. So this is the first step, which is the protocol development. Then comes your actual field work, or you're actually searching for the studies from various databases. You collect the data using a custom-made data collection form. Then the individual studies will undergo a phase of critical appraisal. You assess for bias and applicability. This part is called data collection. Then the third part of it is to analyze and present the results of the data. You meta-analyze. Okay, you combine everything and come with a common or single pooled estimate. Then you interpret the results and draw conclusions. You either improve or update the review once you, have published your data. So these are the part of the actual meta-analysis and the review item. So now systematic review most commonly is done for interventions. Say whether high oxygen therapy or low oxygen therapy. What is beneficial for patients in critical care? Now you're comparing two interventions: high oxygen flow, low oxygen flow. That is the majority of the systematic reviews are. Then there is another half of systematic reviews that specialize in diagnostic tests, like say TrueNAT or Gene Expert or TB Lab. How accurate is this test? What is its sensitivity and specificity? Now there are individual studies. Any test will have some studies being positive, some studies being negative, some studies being on the fence. So what is the overall call on a particular test? Now the WHO has to recommend TB lamp or TrueNAT in a particular setting. They need to know whether all the studies, what is the pooled estimate, what is the overall sensitivity, pooled sensitivity and specificity for a test before they make a policy. So this kind of diagnostic test accuracy systematic reviews will answer these specific questions. So if you look at a medical test, it goes through three phases: a technical phase, a clinical phase, and a recommendation phase. So at the technical phase, whenever you think of a new test, okay, I have come up with a new test called Jefferson's test, and I'm going to use it to diagnose TB. And the government will not immediately give permission, right? I have a test, then I need to prove to the government that my test will diagnose TB. So that is the proof of concept. And then repeatedly, every time I do the test on a TB patient, it comes positive and it is reproducible. I'm taking it to NIIT Chennai and I'm showing the authorities there, see the newly diagnosed test, I'm able to do it, and I'm doing it in multiple settings, and I'm able to repeat the test results. And Liebach is reviewing the test, and Mukesh is seeing, Adin is seeing, and they're all happy. So different people are observing, and there are not many variations. Then the concept is right. So then they will go on. They'll give me permission to do it on patients. So then I will do a case control kind of an accuracy study, and the study test results are fairly good. Then I will put it in the clinical practice, and based on feedback, then there will be large scale studies, comparative accuracy studies, randomized accuracy studies. And if all the studies are showing very good sensitivity and specificity compared to a known reference standard, we are all used to the term gold standard. When it comes to TTE, we won't use the word gold standard. But if you were to explain, gold standard in diagnostic culture, right? So if my midget sensitivity specificity is matching with my Jefferson's test, then I know that my test is good, and then they will recommend my test for clinical use, and then it may be coming in guidelines, and there will be some systematic review groups will be doing some systematic review about Jefferson's test. So that's how it is. So it starts in a lab, and then at different phases it goes through, right? So a medical test first will undergo what is known as a test accuracy at the lab level and at the field level. Once it is satisfied and it is into the market, then there will be studies that will talk about diagnostic yield. How good is this test compared to the already available test? Then finally, they'll talk about therapeutic yield. Because I used this test, how many patients I was able to treat and how many got cured. Okay, then finally the patient outcome. So all these things will need to be looked at. So whether the test is harmful for the patient or not, that's also important, right? Now there is a test which, let's talk about CT guided biopsy of mediastinal lymph node. Now to approach the mediastinum, the CT guided needle has to go through the lungs. And in a COPD patient, when there is emphysema, when you go through the lungs, the chance of pneumothorax is extremely high. Whereas if you do a bronchoscopy, go into the mediastinum and do biopsy from there, you can avoid this harm. So both bronchoscopy and CT guided methods can be used to biopsy a mediastinum. But in that case, a CT guided biopsy may be harmful to the patient. So although the outcome is achieved, at what price, how much the patient has to go through. So that is also important when we look at medical tests. So what is test accuracy? It is just comparison between the disease state estimated by test of interest and the best estimate of the true disease state. Just think about these words. An example would be gene expert in tuberculosis. What I'm just saying is the tuberculosis estimated by gene expert and what is the true estimate of tuberculosis in the same population. Or in other words, let's say gene expert is the test of interest. Okay, the disease of interest is tuberculosis. First, I'm calculating in a particular population how much disease is diagnosed by gene expert. Okay, then in the same population, I'm doing the reference standard or the gold standard for our discussion sake, which is midget culture. So midget culture is estimating a true disease state because that is considered the current reference, globally accepted standard of reference. So midget is telling 90 out of 100 patients have TB. My my test is telling, gene expert is telling 80% of the study population is having tuberculosis. Then I'm comparing. I'm comparing gene expert with the true disease state, which is given by midget. So that is how I will tell that much accuracy. My test is that much accurate in diagnosing tuberculosis. That is what is called as test accuracy. So there are a few definitions when you talk about a diagnostic test accuracy studies. So first is the index test. These are common definitions. Index test is the test under evaluation. For our current review, it's going to be TB now. And we want to know this test's accuracy only. Okay. Now, target condition is the disease which we are trying to detect using the index test. In our condition, it is tuberculosis. Then there is this reference standard. What is the globally accepted test, which is right now the standard of care, standard practice, which is used to diagnose this particular target condition? That is called reference standard. In our condition, it is going to be midget or solid culture media. Okay, that's the best way of identifying the disease which is currently available. So this is our previous topic, okay, previous title, diagnostic accuracy of TrueNet MTB for detection of pulmonary tuberculosis and rifampicin resistance in adults with presumptive tuberculosis. So what is the index test in this title? It's TrueNet MTB. Okay, that's the test which is and what is the um, disease that you're trying to condition, target condition? Pulmonary tuberculosis and rifampicin resistant. That's the target condition. And what is the reference standard? Mentioned in the topic, but in this study we used midget and solid pulses. Okay, so now you look at any diagnostic test studies. This is how the study would have been planned. There may be multiple variations, but a standard study design for a diagnostic test would be you have study sample and you do the index test on it. Okay, the index test will be either positive or it will be negative. Irrespective of the result of the index test, you go ahead and do the reference standard. And based on that, you classify the studies test results as either reference standard positive to not positive, double positive. Sometimes reference standard is negative, but the TrueNet test is positive. That means it's a false positive. Reference standard is positive, but then the index test is negative. That is a false negative. Both the reference standard and the index tests are negative, which is a true negative. So you either classify it as true positive, true negative, or false positive, false negative, based on which you calculate sensitivity and specificity for a specific test. So in summary, you will go through a series of patients will go through the index test. They will also go through the reference standard, and then you'll cross classify into true positive, true negative, false positive, false negative. Now, a little more details into the diagnostic test accuracy. You can grossly classify them as single gated studies or two gated studies. Single gated study means there's only one entry criteria. Let's say all people who attend pulmonary medicine OPD. Okay, that is one gate. Or all patients who have cough and fever for 2 weeks. That is one gate or one entry criteria. Okay, it's called gate because people enter through the entry criteria. So if you have to put a name to these people who have fever and cough for 2 weeks, you can call them presumptive tuberculosis, right? So these are the patients who can potentially have tuberculosis. So presumptive tuberculosis is the study population or a target population. The target condition you are going to diagnose is TB. So that is the study sample, and you put index test for them. Let's say gene expert, and they're either positive or negative. Then you verify, then you calculate true positive, true false, true negative, false positive, false negative. This is the standard study design. Now there may be some studies which may do it little differently. Okay, they may have two gates. What do you mean by two gates? There are two entry criteria. So what they may do is I want to compare the study in TB. Okay, and in normal patients also. I don't want normal patients to be falsely diagnosed as TB, right? So I have two entry criteria. One entry criteria, I am choosing patients with presumptive TB, or rather patients who have cough for 2 weeks and fever for 2 weeks. In another, I know they are negative, but to calculate, I can still calculate sensitivity specificity, right? If I use patients who don't have TB, so I include patients who have cough because of COPD. They actually don't have TB symptoms, but because they are also producing phlegm, I'm using some patients for comparison. So there are TB diseased patients and there are TB non-diseased patients. Or so in them I'm doing index test. So obviously the non-diseased patients will not give a true positive, right? They can either give a false positive or a true negative. Whereas the diseased patients, they already have tuberculosis, so they will definitely give true positive or a false negative. And with this also, I can calculate sensitivity specificity. But take note, the population is different. Okay, you're mixing diseased and non-diseased population. So it will falsely estimate a high sensitivity and a high specificity. Okay, it may not be the true test estimate. A true test should be evaluated in a real life situation. I would prefer this method, a single entry criteria. So you are suspecting TB in a group of patients. You don't know whether they are truly having or not. That is the real life situation, right? When a patient comes to an OPD or a TB center, we do not know whether they truly have TB or not. We can only guess or suspect based on symptoms or X-ray. And to diagnose only, you are going to do your test. So here, all your patients, those with test positive and test negative, come from the same population or a single gate. Okay, the study sample is from a single entry eligible criteria. This is the most purest form of diagnostic test accuracy studies. Okay, There are multiple studies this way. There will be cases and controls, deceased and not deceased. The population from which you recruit is not even. So such a method will not be very appropriate, or rather, it will falsely give you a false sensitivity specificity, which you may not truly reflect in the actual field. Okay. So here are four study designs, A, B, C, and D. So if you were to compare Gene Expert with TrueNAT, you're comparing two tests. Which of these four methods will you choose? Is it A? Let's look at A. So A, there are a series of patients, they're going through test A, index test B, but there is no reference standard. So that's not a very good test, because what are you comparing them against? You cannot compare test A against test B. When you don't know which one is better, both may not be better, right? You need a reference standard. So test A, method A, you would not choose, okay? Now look at method B. So there are series of patients, there are two index tests, all of them are undergoing reference standard, then you test it. Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good. You look at type C, there are a series of patients and you are randomizing them, test A and test B. Some of them are getting test A, some of them are getting test B, but you make note of it, it's the same group of patients who are randomized, not two different, it's a single gate, okay? So because it's a single gate, single entry criteria, and all of them are undergoing reference standard, this method is also okay. Look at option D. Option D has index test. All of them are going to reference standard, but they have two gates. The series of patients are different. It's not the same group. For all you know, it may not be representative. So I wouldn't choose option D. Both option B and C are fair. One, all patients are going through test A and test B. In C, some are going through test A, some are going through test B, but all of them are going through reference standard. All of them are from the same population. So these two designs are better. So talking about, you have written a protocol. Now you need a search strategy. So we have one member in our team who will be a search expert, and the authors will discuss with him and see, how to find these studies from the various search engines or the various libraries. Right? So we will have a search strategy for each database. We will search in all databases. Systematic review has to be thorough, right? You cannot include, okay, I won't include any Japanese articles because I don't know Japanese. No, that's not the right way. You should either clearly tell that you will be able to take only particular language, then again it will be biased. Okay, you should not tell, okay, I don't have access to paid journals or Embase. I do not have subscription to Embase, so I won't be including studies from Embase. That will be faulty, right? Your systematic review should include all languages, studies from all countries, paid or unpaid. You should have the means to obtain such articles through the acceptable means. Okay, you have to collect the full text, and individually in pairs or in groups of two, you have to assess each study for bias. You collect the study characteristics, collect the data. Okay, these are all steps. Assessing bias is very important. Right? Whenever you tell a test estimate, let's say TrueNAT is 90% sensitive and this much percent specific, how sure are you whether the study was done without bias? Okay, how can bias come in diagnostic tests? That's very important, and that's a class in itself. If we go through it later, but bias, will either underestimate or overestimate study values, right? The two-gate system is a bias. You are introducing bias because you already know that one group has disease, one group do not have disease. So that's like you already have the knowledge. So when you interpret, let's say TB lab or FB smear, you look at it and say, yeah, I know this patient already has TB. The color change is there, no, in TB lab. It has to be positive only. So you will be biased if you know the result already, right? So that's why the two-gate system is not a thing. It's not good for not a good study design. So bias can distort patient selection. Okay, you will know, okay, fine, I know he's positive, so I'll put him in this group. Blinding is very important. Okay, if there is no blinding, the person who's conducting, the PA will know, okay, this patient will be likely to give a positive result. And you should have a proper verification process whether this method is followed or not. So intervention studies, they have risk of bias two tool, and there are multiple other tools also to assess risk of bias for intervention studies. There's equivalent of it for diagnostic test accuracy studies, the QuADAS tool. There is a quota C for comparative studies as well. They assess risk of bias under four domains: patient selection, whether there was any risk in patient selection; index test application and interpretation; reference kind of application and interpretation; the flow and the timing. What came first? If you have done the reference kind of first, let's say you did the digit first, you already know the digit result. And then you do expert, obviously you know it's already positive. So you may falsely interpret your TB lab. TB lab is highly subject oriented. So the flow and timing is very important. You collected the sputum sample today, and you actually send it to the midget culture lab after 5 6 days. What is the viability of the bacilli until it? How was it transported? Was it taken through? All those are important, right? Flow and timing. So you have to go through each study how exactly they administered the test. They will follow the particular protocol for that test. Each test will have certain methods, right? This is how you should pack the sample, you should transport. So all that whether it is followed or not. All these are bias and it can be assessed in the quadruped tool. So the quadruped tool, we have to summarize the review question and we have to tailor the tool, right, based on our study design. See, we had a true not right. For true not, we sat and wrote in the quadruped tool, change the wordings, everything, so that the person who is going to do the risk of bias, it will be easy for him to read, okay, for this particular study, this is the tool I'm using to assess the risk of bias. So when we go through the risk of bias classes, you will understand more, but we have to rewrite and tailor make according to the current review question. And we have to draw a flow diagram for the primary study, each study that you're assessing, and only then, risk of bias also means whether the study is applicable to our setting, whether the population or the question that we're trying to answer is it applicable or not. For example, you may take a TB lung study, but it may be done in adults. But here we are applying to pediatric population. So how much is the study applicable to our population or our setting? That is also important. So finally comes your systematic review, analysis, and write-up. So like I said, you will calculate two positives, two negatives, false negatives, and based on that, you will be calculating your sensitivity, your specificity, positive predictive value, and your negative predictive value. And we will have extensive classes related for these things. And these are the estimates you're going to pool and create a final pooled estimate of sensitivity and specificity for that particular test and target condition. Okay, then you write. So it actually starts with identifying a PICO statement. You write the title. So we have done the title proposal to Cochrane for TB Lab. Once they accept, you will start writing a protocol. The protocol will talk about our search strategy, our inclusion exclusion criteria, which are databases we are going to search. Then you have to put the entire thing in writing. You get approval from the Cochrane board or whichever. You publish the protocol. Once the protocol is published, you cannot change it much. So you do your actual search strategy, collect all the studies, put it in EndNote, you remove duplicates, then you shortlist 2 3 people will be going through the article screening based on the title and abstract and potential things you will list it. Then again you'll go through one more round of article screening where you obtain full text and see whether it is includable or not includable. Then if you are not including, you have to justify. Complaint is very detailed. Each and every article you screen, you have to justify why you include and why you are not included. It has to be very detailed. So then you have to manually search the references of the included articles to see if there are some more studies. You have to be as elaborate as possible, not miss out any articles. Then your final list of selected articles, you take your full text, you extract the data, do risk of bias, then you do data entry, data analysis. You have to be double checking your thing. Everything in Cochrane and any systematic review will always be done by 2 people separately, and then discrepancies if present will be sorted out. Finally, you will be writing your manuscript, you will be revising, and you will be submitting. Okay, this is the entire process of a systematic review. Now, once this is clear, in the next half of the class, I will be talking about a few study designs in diagnostic test accuracy. I already spoke to you about the single gate and the double gate and how there are target conditions, index tests, reference standards, and cross-tabulating your results based on the diagnostic test. Okay, a good diagnostic test The patients must be selected either consecutively or randomly. Okay, it cannot be convenience. Okay, it has to be either consecutive or random. An index set should be interpreted without the knowledge of the results of the reference standard. Like for example, in our study, you should not know the midget result before interpreting the TB lamp result, or it should not be done by the same person. Okay, and the reference standard should be a good reference standard. It should classify the target condition correctly. Okay, for example, you cannot use AFP smear as a reference standard for TB, and you cannot compare diagnostic test accuracy of two expert and gene expert using AFP smear as a reference standard, because we know AFP smear can sometimes we miss it, can be missed. Okay, it's not a good reference standard. On the other hand, culture method is very much better. So you have to use that. Okay. Then the time interval between each test is very important. Okay. Now we had this question when we did the TrueNAT review. How much time is acceptable between doing TrueNAT and sending it to the culture lab to do the widget? So we arrived at 72 hours as a reasonable time, and certain specific transportation method have to be used. Okay, so that is very important. Then all the patients must be analyzed using the same reference standard. You cannot have test A gene expert using midget and test B using LPA. Okay, both are different, right? So it has to be used, the same reference standard must be used. Sometimes that the reference standard may include both. It may include both LPA and midget. That's different. That's a composite reference standard. But otherwise, all patients, all tests must undergo the same reference standard. So the type one, the most common type of diagnostic test accuracy is a cross-sectional study. Patients are selected, index test is applied, reference standard is applied, diagnostic measures are, accuracy measures are measured. Okay, that's your straightforward cross-sectional study. Now there are case control studies, which I told you, the two-gate system. The patients with disease, patients without disease. Both of them will undergo study index test, both of them will undergo reference standard, and they will be undergoing accuracy measures. Now, this is not a very good study design, but in certain conditions only this is possible. Let's take rare diseases, for example, hemochromatosis. I want to study the diagnostic test accuracy of a molecular test in diagnosing hemochromatosis in the lungs. Okay. Now we hardly see 10 patients in 2 3 years. How can I, it's very difficult. So let me take all patients with hemochromatosis as in one arm, and I will take silicosis patient in the other arm, then I apply the same test. I can still be able to diagnose uh, diagnostic test accuracy measures, but just that it will be falsely high or falsely low. Okay. The third group of study design is called comparative studies. This is also very common. This is only for one test, right? TB lamp against midget or gene expert against midget. But if you want to compare TrueNAT and gene expert, how well they do against each other when compared to a reference standard such as midget, then you will do a comparative study design. It's the third group. First, you saw a single gate method, cross-sectional study. Second, you saw the double gate method, which is your case control study. Third is your comparative studies. Now, comparative study can be both non-randomized and randomized. You don't really randomize. 100 patients are coming to my OPD. First 50 patients I'm sending here, second 50 patients I'm sending here. I'm not truly randomizing in that sense, sequential patients I'm taking. Okay, that is your non-randomized comparative study. Now this is what I'm talking about, randomized and non-randomized. Non-randomized is all your patients will go through both the index tests, and then go through the reference standard. Then you estimate the sensitivity specificity for test A and test B separately. Whereas a randomized design means there are 100 patients and I put lots. 50 patients, let them do index test A, 50 patients, then they'll do index test B. Both of them will undergo the same reference standard, then you calculate. Okay. Now, this is the non-randomized comparative study. Simple ways, patients are selected, both of them go through test A, test B, both of them will undergo reference standard, and then you calculate diagnostic accuracy measures. Now, the randomized has two methods. Okay, the randomized method, you randomize, and half of them will go through test A, half of them will go through test B. There's a different method where you randomize only the order in which the tests are done. Okay, so 50% will go through test A first, 50% will go through test B first, and after some time, the test A people will go to test B, and the test B people will go to test A. So invariably, all the patients get
all the tests done, but in a different order. Okay. So comparative diagnostic test accuracy studies, they can be again in another five things. We grossly classified diagnostic test accuracy as cross-sectional, case control, and comparative. Again, in comparative, there are multiple study designs. Okay, and it's very important to know because each study author will be using different names for different participant study designs. They'll be calling it by their own terms, and if you're not aware, when you're actually doing study design, you'll get confused. Okay, so before designing or labeling a particular comparative study design into a particular name, you need to look at all this. What is the direction of data collection? Is it prospective or retrospective? How many gates are there? One or two? How is the participant sampling method done? Randomized or non-randomized? How are the patients allocated to the index tests? The number of reference standards, single, two, or composite, and how have all patients undergone verification? Sometimes they may, verify only a subset of patients with reference standard, others may not be. So these six questions need to be answered. So I have already explained, right? The data collection can be prospective or retrospective. Okay, you have to reconstruct the participant flow, and the whether the data was collected prospectively or they have obtained it from records. Sometimes the data may be missing. So all those are important. Whether it is a single gate or a multiple gate, I told you, right? Based on the eligibility criteria, whether you are using the same population or using normal population and abnormal population, whether it is both consecutive and random sampling methods are accepted, whereas convenient sampling is not something which we would encourage. It's not a good method. And whether a method of allocating participants to index test, okay, whether which method, randomized or non-randomized, uh, whether all of them went through both the tests or some of them went through one test and others did not go through, all those are important. And sometimes reference standard may be single, it may be multiple. Sometimes they may say choice was based on clinical indication. For example, pulmonary embolism, CTPA would be a good gold standard, but patient has CKD, so in that case I did a ventilation perfusion scan. So there are different reference standard, but they should have explained why and how. Okay, in that situation only that is possible. You cannot do a CT scan in a CKD patient. So how did they describe the reference standard and how many reference standard they have? Normally, every single index test should be evaluated by the same single reference standard. If there are more than one used, how was it chosen? That's important. Okay, limited verification whether it is present or not. Sometimes doing CTPA for all your D-dimer patients. I'm using D-dimer to. I'm comparing the effectiveness of D-dimer in diagnosing PE. Now, DDM is only 300 rupees, whereas CT pulmonary angiogram is 10,000 rupees, and my study sample size is 10,000. Okay, I'm also doing VQ scan. Now, I don't have fund for 10,000 CT pulmonary angiogram, that would be crores. So I diagnosed pulmonary embolism D-dimer, and I confirmed it with VQ scan, but the reference standard I can do it only for 100 patients. So that is limited verification, right? So whether they did it or not and why they did it, and the author is supposed to describe all these things. So the person who is assessing the risk of bias will go through all these things before designing or drawing a flowchart for that particular study and putting it into a particular study design. Then the team will decide whether to include or not. Okay, based on the study flowchart and based on how they have fared with. Okay. So doctors, when they write their studies, they may call it prospective study, they may call it retrospective study, or comparative study, head-to-head comparison of TrueNat and expert in diagnosing pulmonary tuberculosis. Prognostic diagnostic performance of D-dimer in pulmonary embolism. Comparative diagnostic study of CTPA and VQ scan in diagnosing pulmonary embolism. So these are the various data labels used by authors, and you shouldn't, because they have said only prospective, it doesn't, you cannot leave it out in your study screening method. So you have to be very careful. So I told you, right, there are five designs of comparative studies. This is a pictorial representation of that. A fully paired study design is nothing but your single gate method. Okay, patients will undergo test A, test B, then reference standard. This is your fully paired. Then there is a partially paired with the random subset, because you are unable to do tests for everyone. This happens when you're comparing costly test PET CT scan in staging of pulmonary malignancies compared to doing a CT thorax and ultrasound abdomen for staging. Okay, you cannot afford PET CT scan for everyone if the sample size is very high. So you decide to do test A, then you will do the test B in only a subset of the patients, but you will randomize them. Okay, so this is partially paired because half of the group of people are going through both test A and test B, so it's partially paired, but then the pairing is randomized. So you can partially pair but not randomized. That's the partially paired with non-random subset. Everybody goes through test A, everybody goes through D-dimer, but you're comparing CTPA and the reference standard is your PQ scan. So CTPA is very costly. So you're doing only for a subset of patients who went through some test A, but you are not really randomizing. It's non-randomized. Then is your unpaired randomized. So let's decide, okay, fine. Half of them will go through DDMR, half of them will go through CTPA, but you are randomizing them. Okay, that's your unpaired randomized. Now there is an unpaired non-randomized. Okay, so you are not randomizing them and they are not paired also, which is a very weak study design. So you may decide while writing protocol which of these designs you may include. We normally include fully paired, we may include unpaired randomized. Sometimes we may choose to include partially paired with random subset. We may not include the type 3 and type 5. That's what we did for TrueNet, but again, it's different from different studies, and the systematic review group will have to decide on that. Now, that's briefly about the various study designs in diagnostic tests. Brief word about Cochrane, because we are all going to do a Cochrane systematic review. We are trying to do this for for the general benefit of all the patients in the world. So it's an NGO. Anybody can become an author or a member. It's a very free society kind of a setup. They're very supportive. There's adequate opportunities for training. The editorial team will support us through the entire process. Unlike other journals where you write an article and then you try to publish, and they will ask you 1,000 questions. Here, they will start, like we have submitted our title proposal to them. They'll look at it. They look at the team whether we are capable or not. They'll help us. They'll say, okay, you don't have a search specialist, we will give you a search specialist. You don't have a good statistician, we will give you a statistician. When I mean by statistician, somebody who's well versed with diagnostic test accuracy statistics. Okay, so they will provide help. They will, if you need help from other teams, they may provide mentors and everything. And they usually prefer it to be multinational or inter-institutional. I mean, if I'm in CMC, I want to do a CMC systematic review, they wouldn't encourage that. They say, no, there are doctors from NIRT. Okay, there are doctors from NAE, there are doctors from UK. You include them. It has to be multinational. Why? Only then you will have a global perspective to it. Okay, it is not merely publishing and filling our CVs. It's actually doing something good for the community. Somebody is spending their time looking at all the things, addressing one particular research question and giving a full estimate, which will help institutions like WHO or uh, our Indian government or any government to make a particular policy guidelines. Okay, so you need not worry about the publication. Okay, because it's already taken care. Once the title proposal is accepted, they will help us through and guide us through and through, unless we are not doing a good job. Okay, so don't worry about the publication. It has a very high impact factor. The latest impact factor is in fact 12. So it's good for us also. It's very rewarding, and it's totally free of cost. We don't have to pay for it. And overall, it is actually a service for mankind. What we can do in the next 3 months will bring in major policy changes across the country and across the globe, and people are going to get benefited by your. So you should take pride in what you're doing, because this kind of research will have high rewarding, decision making. People, you will be rewarded for what you're doing because you are actually helping the mankind indirectly. So the expectations is punctuality. The last time we did it, we had a schedule. We kept by the schedule. You all met the deadlines. In fact, I think Deepak already informed how Professor MSc and team was very, very happy and how impressed. In fact, the very reason we got the second review was because of our timeliness in meeting deadlines. Cochrane and the International Scientific Committee is very particular about these things. So that's where we can make a move to be punctual and keep up with our schedule. We will have weekly meetings and update. course, there will be some flexibility. So most people are not available because of some event. We can always postpone the time or do it on Saturday, but there will be weekly, if not once in 2 weeks, meetings and updates. There will be a regular progress monitoring. Okay, and the work has to be meticulous and it has to be verifiable. See, it is not your thesis. It's not your MD thesis or PhD thesis. You are unable to meet the deadline, so there's no, and being forced to do this work, sometimes, okay, you will be careless, you'll be very casual. You won't actually screen the article properly, properly take the title. I was asked to do, so I'm doing. It has to be very perfect, right? This is really high work. The opportunity that you have got is really a top-notch opportunity. So you have to do it well, meticulously and verifiable in a good way. Okay, be honest and truthful to the work we are doing. And in order to avoid careless mistakes, always we will do in groups of two. So person A will be doing, person B will also be doing the same thing. Then both of us will be comparing. If there are differences, then a third person will come in and resolve the problem. So the careless mistakes will be picked up. Don't worry. So we have to train and self-train. Okay, Cochrane. Once you are registered into the system, you will have Cochrane login ID. Using that, you can use the Cochrane training resources freely. There are multiple webcasts, PDFs. Okay, so we will have some workshops for new people. We will have some revision workshops also. We already did it with TDNAT, TrueNAT. Okay, so there will be multiple teaching sessions from our side. You can also independently learn. You can approach one of us independently to get more information. Okay, so as of now, I think Thursday has been identified for group meetings. We'll have live sessions, we'll have training and self-paced learning. So that is the link for Cochrane DTA review training methods. Go through them once you get your login ID. Some of you already have, make use of it. So they have a CME kind of learning where you'll get a certificate for every module that you complete. So it's good for you in your career as well. Okay, so I'll end my session here. If there are any questions for those of you who are listening online, after the actual class, you can mail me or you can contact me. And yeah, all the best. Let's hope we will be able to do this well. Okay, bye.